I'm Emily Carter, 33 years old, standing frozen in the entryway of my coastal home in Cape Cod. After nearly a decade of complete silence, my parents suddenly showed up unannounced at my beach house, the very place they believed they had rented for their exclusive family reunion. Of course, I wasn't invited. The expression on my father's face the moment he realized this was my property was something I'll never forget. My mother clutched her handbag so tightly that it nearly slipped from her grasp. Her carefully maintained composure fractured for the first time in years. The last time I'd seen them was when I was barely 23, walking away with nothing but a worn suitcase and a secondhand camera after they coldly declared me dead to the family. I didn't raise my voice when they appeared in my doorway today. I didn't need to. Before I share what happened next, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Would you stay calm if you were standing face to face with the people who erased you? Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to rebuild yourself after being cast aside. Growing up as the middle child in the Carter family meant living under a constant shadow of being not enough. My father, Richard, a high-profile Boston real estate investor with deep New England roots, and my mother, Margaret, from an old money Southern lineage, built their lives like one of those grand estates they admired. Perfect on the outside, hollow within. My older brother, Matthew, followed the expected blueprint: elite prep school, Harvard Law, and by 29, partner at a prestigious firm. My younger sister, Claire, married the heir of one of my father's business allies before finishing college, securing her place with a sparkling 3-carat diamond and a coveted country club membership. And then there was me. Since I was 8, I carried a camera everywhere. Not fancy gear, just a simple point and shoot my grandmother gifted me. I captured everything: the way morning sunlight spilled across the kitchen table, the shadows playing on the manicured garden, the subtle smile our housekeeper Rosa gave when she thought no one noticed. Photography was just a hobby, my mother would say, gently straightening the throw pillows I'd disturbed on the living room couch. Not a career for someone like you. By 15, I'd saved enough from babysitting and odd jobs to buy my first decent camera. Every spare minute, I devoured books and tutorials, hiding my passion like a secret. You need something practical, my father insisted my junior year. Business, maybe. I had a knack for numbers, sure, but only because understanding aperture, shutter speed, and ISO was like solving a puzzle for me. Still, I compromised. I applied to Boston University's business school, and that was enough to satisfy them. What they didn't know was that I also signed up for photography electives, sneaking off to the art studios between finance lectures. For 4 years, I lived a double life. The obedient daughter chasing a sensible degree while quietly nurturing my real passion during stolen moments. Then came graduation day. We gathered at a cozy restaurant near the Charles River, low lights casting warm reflections on crystal glasses as we celebrated my newly earned business degree. I had planned this moment carefully, with an internship offer from a respected marketing agency in hand, a position my father had helped arrange. I finally felt I had enough leverage to tell them the truth. I've decided to pursue photography professionally, I announced after the appetizers had been cleared. I've been accepted into a prestigious mentorship program. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's smile stayed firmly in place, but her eyes hardened. My father just stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. "Don't be ridiculous," he finally said. "You're starting at Patterson and Chase next month. It's all arranged," he added. "I'm not," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt inside. "I've already declined their offer." What followed was a precise dismantling of my dreams, delivered with the cold calculation my parents reserved for business deals. Photography was too risky, they said, financially unstable, and beneath our family's standing. They rattled off statistics about struggling artists and squandered potential. "If you pursue this," my father said at last, "you do so without our support, financial or otherwise. We've invested too much in you to watch you throw it all away," my mother added. "You'll come to your senses eventually," they warned. But I didn't. 2 days later, I packed everything I could fit into my battered old Honda Civic, mostly clothes and camera gear. My bank account held the remnants of my graduation money. $800. Not nearly enough for a security deposit on an apartment. Barely enough for a few weeks at a hostel. Matthew watched me pack, leaning in the doorway of my childhood room. "They'll get over it," he said, though his voice betrayed doubt. Claire didn't even come upstairs to say goodbye. That first year was brutal. I rented a tiny room in a cramped Brooklyn apartment with 3 strangers. By day, I worked as a barista. Evenings, I waited tables. Nights and weekends, I built my portfolio, photographing anything that might get me noticed. Urban street scenes, birthday parties for friends who couldn't afford a professional, profile pictures for dating apps. That first Christmas away from home, I called my parents' number. The line just rang and rang. No answer, no voicemail. I tried again on New Year's Day, then on my birthday, then Easter. Eventually, I stopped trying. Matthew sent occasional texts during that first year. "Happy birthday! Merry Christmas!" He even met me once for coffee, nervous, checking his watch every few minutes. "They just need time," he said, avoiding my gaze. "You know how they are about the family image." By the second year, even those messages stopped. I learned through social media that Claire had her first child. No one told me I'd become an aunt. I found out about my grandmother's passing through an obituary online. My name wasn't listed among surviving family members. The silence wasn't just absence, it was deliberate erasure, as if I never existed. My big break came out of sheer desperation. A popular Boston wedding photographer needed an emergency assistant after his regular helper called in sick. The pay was meager, $100 for 12 hours of work. But I needed every cent. I showed up early, stayed late, anticipating his needs before he even asked. "You've done this before," Garrett Reynolds said as we packed up equipment well past midnight. "No," I admitted, "but I want to learn." Garrett wasn't the charitable type, but he recognized a hunger in me that matched his own. Within 6 months, I was his second shooter at high-end weddings, learning not just camera techniques, but the business side. Contracts, client management, marketing. "One thing," Garrett said one afternoon, reviewing my portfolio. "Real estate photography is where the steady money is. Weddings are seasonal. People buy houses year-round," he explained. Garrett introduced me to a realtor friend who needed photos for a modest listing. The commission was small, but I treated it like a spread for Architectural Digest. The realtor was impressed and referred me to her colleagues. Within months, I specialized in real estate photography, building a reputation for making even modest homes look their absolute best. 2 years into this career, I landed my first luxury property shoot, a $4.2 million penthouse overlooking the Boston skyline. The owner, Lisa Montgomery, was there during the session, watching quietly. "You see angles others miss," she remarked. "You've got an eye for something special. You find beauty in unexpected places," Lisa told me once. She was 68, a widow who had built a publishing empire from the ground up. She hired me to photograph several of her properties and soon began recommending me to her friends. Before long, I was photographing homes for some of Manhattan's wealthiest families. When Lisa was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, she asked me to document her favorite homes as part of a personal project. We traveled together to her estates across the country, a mountain lodge in Aspen, a pied-à-terre in San Francisco, and her favorite, a stunning beach house in the Hamptons. "My children hate this place," she confided as we walked along the private stretch of sand. "Too remote," they say. "Too much upkeep." Lisa passed away 6 months later. I attended her funeral, standing quietly at the back of a packed cathedral. Her grown children, all in their 40s, wore the expected somber expressions but seemed impatient for the reception to begin. None of them recognized me. 3 weeks later, I received a call from Lisa's attorney. "Ms. Montgomery left you something," he said. "Can you come to the office tomorrow?" I expected perhaps a piece of jewelry or a camera from her collection. Instead, the attorney slid a deed across the desk. "The Hamptons Beach House," he explained. Lisa had left it to me, along with a maintenance fund to cover property taxes and upkeep for 5 years. I stared at the paper, unable to believe what I was seeing. "There must be a mistake," I finally managed to say. "No mistake," he replied. He handed me an envelope. Lisa's letter was brief but clear. "Emily, you understand beauty in a way my family never has. This house deserves someone who appreciates it. Make it your own, but more importantly, make it work for you. I built my life turning passions into profit. Now it's your turn." The beach house became both my home and my business headquarters. I converted the guest house into a photography studio, offering exclusive sessions to wealthy clients vacationing in the Hamptons. I expanded coastal vision photography, hiring assistants and taking on commercial real estate clients. What began as a one-woman operation grew into a sought-after brand in luxury property marketing. By 30, I had 6 employees, a client list that included celebrities and business moguls, and enough savings to buy a modest apartment in Manhattan. My work had been featured in Architectural Digest, Elle Decor, and Hamptons Magazine. I had built a life my parents never imagined. Successful on my own terms, financially secure, creatively fulfilled. I had close friends, a small circle of trusted colleagues, and a few romantic relationships, though none lasted. Sometimes, alone in the beach house late at night, I'd look at old family photos. The few old photos I'd managed to save and bring with me were tucked away in a worn album. The 5 of us at Matthew's law school graduation, Claire's sweet 16 party, my parents on their 25th anniversary, arms around each other, perfectly coordinated in summer whites. Success had healed many wounds, but not the one that mattered most. I had proven them wrong about everything except one crucial point. I had lost my family. And despite all I'd accomplished, there were still moments when that loss felt unbearable. Then, an Instagram notification caught me off guard. Matthew the Carter 87 had posted for the first time in months. I rarely checked my brother's social media. His carefully curated posts of the perfect family life only reminded me of my exclusion. But something made me tap on the notification that day. The photo showed my parents standing on a beach, arms around each other, squinting against the bright sun. The caption read, "Looking forward to our family reunion next month in the Hamptons. Mom and Dad's 40th anniversary deserves a special celebration." I froze, staring at the familiar coastline behind them. That wasn't just any beach. It was my beach, the private stretch behind Lisa's house. My house. Digging deeper, I uncovered the truth. My family had rented my beach house through a luxury property management agency that handled bookings discreetly while owners were away. Clients never knew who owned the homes they rented. My first instinct was to cancel their reservation immediately. I called my property manager, Angela. "They've paid in full," she said. "Non-refundable. It would be highly unusual to cancel without cause." "The cause is that they're my estranged family who haven't spoken to me in 10 years, I replied. There was a long pause. "That's complicated," Angela finally said. "Legally, we can cancel, but it might cause problems. They could leave negative reviews or dispute the charges." I thanked her and said I'd think about it. For days, I wrestled with what to do. Part of me wanted to avoid confrontation altogether, book a last-minute business trip, let them enjoy their reunion, never knowing whose house they were in. Then I saw my mother's post on her rarely updated Facebook page, looking forward to our humble family gathering in the Hamptons. Nothing extravagant, just quality time with the people who matter most. Something inside me hardened. Humble? The house rents for $15,000 a week during peak season, and the people who matter most clearly didn't include me. I made my decision. I wouldn't cancel their reservation, but I wouldn't hide either. This was my house, my life, my success. For once, I wouldn't be the one who disappeared. The week before their arrival, I prepared meticulously. I upgraded the security system, adding cameras in all the main rooms, the living room, kitchen, and deck. Not a spy, I told myself, but for security. Still, the moment they arrived, I found myself watching the footage. My father came first, his eyes sharp as he inspected the property, running his hand over the marble countertops like he was checking for imperfections. My mother followed, directing where the luggage should go with military precision. Matthew arrived next with his wife and their 2 children, a boy and a girl I'd never met. Claire and her husband showed up with their 3 kids, Various aunts, uncles, and cousins trickled in throughout the afternoon. Through the cameras, I watched them explore what they thought was just a luxury rental. I saw my mother rearranging the flowers I'd carefully placed in the living room. I watched my father examine the art on the walls, pieces I'd selected over years, each one meaningful. The most painful moment came when they arranged family photos on the console table. Decades of Carter family history from which I'd been systematically erased. There I was, in a group photo from a ski trip, until my mother shifted that frame behind another one. The message couldn't have been clearer. I was unmentionable. My existence, a footnote best forgotten. That evening, I listened to their dinner conversation through the security system, feeling like a ghost haunting my own home. They talked about Matthew's recent promotion, Claire's children's achievements at private school, my parents' upcoming Mediterranean cruise. Not once was my name mentioned. Only my cousin Zoe, a teenager now, though she was a child when I left, brought me up. "What happened to Emily?" she asked during a lull. "She used to take the best pictures at family gatherings," Zoe added softly. The silence that followed was immediate and heavy. "That's not an appropriate dinner topic, Zoe," my mother said sharply. "I'm just asking," Zoe persisted. "She had always been kind to me." "Your cousin made her choices," my father replied. "We don't need to discuss it further." Zoe looked like she wanted to argue, but fell silent under my aunt's warning glance. I turned off the monitor, my hands shaking. 10 years of absence, and I was reduced to an unsuitable dinner topic. A choice made, a chapter closed. I poured myself a glass of wine and walked down to the beach, watching the lights from my house reflect softly on the dark water. Tomorrow, I decided, tomorrow, I would walk through that door and reclaim my place. Not in their family, perhaps, but in my own story. The next morning, I chose my outfit carefully. A simple, yet elegant black dress, subtle jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Professional, successful, unmistakably in control. I waited until they were all gathered for lunch on the deck, a meal my housekeeper had prepared, before quietly leaving for the day. The sound of my heels clicking on the hardwood floors announced my arrival before I even appeared in the doorway. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward me, expressions ranging from confusion to shock. My mother was the first to recognize me. The crystal wine glass she'd been holding slipped from her fingers, shattering on the deck. My father half rose from his chair, his face draining of color so rapidly I worried for a moment about his health. "Emily," Matthew whispered, as if saying my name too loudly might make me vanish. I smiled, the polished, professional smile I'd perfected over the years for difficult clients. "Hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying your stay." Amanda was the first to recover, eyes narrowing. "What are you doing here? How did you get in?" "I live here," I replied simply. "This is my house." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the children seemed to sense the tension, pausing their play to stare at the unfamiliar aunt who had materialized like a ghost from a story they'd never been told. "That's impossible," my father finally said, voice hoarse. "We rented this property through Hampton Luxury Estates." "Yes, you did," I confirmed. "They manage the property when I'm traveling for work." I stepped further onto the deck, claiming my space. I wasn't going anywhere this week. My mother sank slowly back into her chair, eyes wide. "You own this house?" The question carried everything. How could you afford this? What have you been doing all these years? How did this happen without our knowledge? Before I could answer, a small figure broke from the group and rushed toward me. "Emily!" My cousin Zoe threw her arms around my waist. "I knew you'd come back someday." Her genuine warmth cracked my carefully constructed composure. I hugged her back, surprised by the emotion tightening my throat. "Look how grown up you are," I said, stepping back to see her properly. The gap-toothed 7-year-old I remembered had blossomed into a confident teenager with an artist's observant eyes. That unexpected warmth seemed to thaw the frozen tableau. Relatives approached cautiously. Aunt Dorothy kissed my cheek. Uncle Paul shook my hand awkwardly. Cousins waved from a distance, unsure how to greet the family pariah. My parents remained seated, my mother's knuckles white around her replacement wine glass. My father's expression unreadable beneath his practiced neutrality. Matthew approached next, his handshake stiffening into a half hug. "You look great, Emily," he said, his voice thick with something that might have been guilt. Claire stayed close to her husband, her arm linked protectively through his, as if I might somehow threaten their perfect little world. "Well," I said, addressing the group, "I didn't mean to interrupt your lunch. Please continue." "Join us," Aunt Dorothy suggested immediately. "There's plenty of food." I noticed my mother flinch slightly at the invitation, as if an outsider had breached her carefully curated family event. For a moment, I considered declining, retreating to my studio to let them digest the reality of my presence. But something held me rooted in place. This was my home, my territory. For once, they would be the ones adjusting to me, not the other way around. "Thank you," I said. "I'd like that." The meal that followed was a masterclass in strained politeness. Conversation flowed through safe channels. The weather, the beach, compliments on the house. No one met my gaze except Zoe, who peppered me with questions about photography until her mother gently shushed her. "Actually," I said, smiling at Zoe, "I'd be happy to answer your questions. Photography is my career, after all." "My company specializes in architectural and real estate imagery," I added. "Real estate photography," my father repeated, directing his first direct words at me. "That's how you afford this place?" The implication was clear. My chosen career couldn't possibly support this lifestyle. "Partly," I replied evenly. "Coastal vision photography has been quite successful. We handle luxury properties throughout the Northeast," I continued, with a client list that includes several celebrities and business leaders. I paused before adding, "But this particular house was left to me by a mentor, a woman who believed in my talent when others didn't." My mother flinched slightly, but held her composure. "How?" she asked. "Fortunate for you?" "Yes." I met her gaze steadily. "It was." The afternoon unfolded like this. Careful questions, measured answers, moments of almost normal conversation broken by sudden, awkward silences. The children, bored by the adult tension they didn't understand, eventually drifted away to play on the beach. By evening, an uneasy truce had settled. I showed them which parts of the house were private, my studio, my bedroom, and which areas they were welcome to use. I answered basic questions about my life, but volunteered nothing beyond what was asked. Polite, professional, completely guarded. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood alone on the deck, watching darkness settle over the ocean. The gentle sound of the door opening behind me didn't make me turn around. "Your photography," my father said, stepping beside me. I hadn't expected him to speak. "I saw some of your work online," he admitted quietly. "Looked you up, now and then." His confession surprised me. "Did you?" I asked. He nodded, eyes fixed on the fading light. "The Manning estate in Greenwich, the Sullivan penthouse renovation. That was your work." "Yes," he said, the words seeming to cost him something. "Very impressive." Before I could respond, he turned away, leaving me with an emotion I couldn't name. Not quite validation, not quite reconciliation. Something fragile, uncertain, forming in the space between us. Later that night, long after most of the family had gone to bed, I found Matthew sitting alone in the kitchen, nursing a glass of scotch. "Can't sleep?" I asked, opening the fridge for water. He shook his head. "Too many thoughts?" I gestured toward the chair across from him. "Join me?" I hesitated, then sat down. We studied each other in the dim light. My successful older brother looked tired, more worn than I remembered. The confident law partner, I thought, noting worry lines that hadn't been there a decade ago. "They told everyone you had a breakdown," he said abruptly. "After graduation, said you couldn't handle the pressure." I absorbed the words slowly. A breakdown. Easier than admitting the truth. I'd defied them. Matthew took a slow sip of scotch. "They told the extended family you were getting treatment that first year. When you didn't come back apologizing, they stopped talking about you. Made it clear the subject was closed." "And you went along with it," I said. Not a question, but a statement. He didn't deny it. "At first, I thought they might be right, that you'd struggle and come back. When you didn't," he shrugged, a gesture heavy with unspoken regrets. It was easier to keep the peace. Easier for whom? For everyone, he replied quietly. For the family image. He looked down at his glass. Dad controls everything, Em. The family finances, the connections, the opportunities. Amanda and I built our lives inside his world. You were the only one brave enough to leave. It wasn't bravery, I said softly. It was survival. Matthew nodded slowly. I know that now. We sat in silence. Why did they really organize this reunion? I finally asked. If you've ever faced the silence of those who should have stood by you, stay with me. There's more to uncover in this journey. Subscribe now so you don't miss what happens next. Mom's never been sentimental about anniversaries. Matthew hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Dad's company is struggling. Has been for years, but it's gotten worse recently. The market crashed, investments failed. They've been keeping up appearances, but... He gestured around the kitchen. This is the first family gathering in 3 years they haven't hosted at their house. They told everyone it was for the beach experience, but really, they couldn't afford their usual display. And their house? Second mortgage. They might lose it if things don't turn around. I processed the information, trying to reconcile it with the parents I'd known. Always financially secure, always certain of their place in the world. There's more, Matthew continued reluctantly. Dad's health isn't good. Heart problems? He's been hiding it from everyone except Mom, but he collapsed at the office last month. Is he getting treatment? Yes, but he's stubborn. Won't follow doctor's orders. Won't slow down or delegate. Seems admitting weakness might speed the company's decline. The kitchen door swung open, and Claire appeared in an expensive silk robe. Her expression shifted from surprise to weariness when she saw me. Family secrets without me? She asked lightly, though her tone had an edge. Just catching up, Matthew replied. Want to join? She hesitated, then took the third chair. For a moment, the three of us sat in silence. The Carter siblings reunited in my kitchen after a decade apart. Your house is beautiful, Claire finally said, each word carefully measured. You've done well for yourself. Thank you. It must be nice, she continued, bitterness creeping in, having complete freedom. No expectations, no obligations. I built my life from nothing, I responded evenly. That comes with its own pressures. At least you got to build it your way. She twisted her diamond wedding ring around her finger. Some of us followed the plan and still ended up unhappy. The raw admission hung between us. Tom's having an affair, she said flatly. Has been for years. Dad knows but pretends not to. Tom's father is his biggest investor. The perfect Carter family image must be maintained at all costs. Matthew reached across the table and squeezed her hand. This wasn't news to him. The siblings had maintained their own connection and secrets while I'd been cast out. Why stay? I asked. Claire gave a brittle laugh. 3 kids, a prenup that gives me nothing if I leave, and no career of my own. What would you suggest I do? I asked quietly. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Margaret Carter appeared in the doorway, her face carefully arranged into the pleasant expression she wore like armor. A late-night gathering, she observed coolly. How nice! The siblings' conversation stopped instantly. Even as adults in their 30s, my mother's presence demanded immediate obedience. Some dynamics never changed. We were just heading to bed, Matthew said, rising quickly. Claire followed suit. They slipped past my mother with murmured goodnights, leaving me alone with her. Margaret took Matthew's vacated seat, her posture flawless as always. Up close, I could see the fine lines that hadn't been there 10 years ago, the careful application of expensive skincare products that couldn't quite hide the effects of time and stress. This is a beautiful home, she said after a moment. You've established quite a life for yourself. Yes, I agreed. I have. Without any help. She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from the tablecloth. You must be very proud. I am, she nodded, eyes fixed on her perfectly manicured hands. Your father and I had certain expectations, plans for how our children's lives would unfold. I remember. We thought we were protecting you, she said, looking up finally. The world can be cruel to dreamers, Emily. We didn't want you to struggle unnecessarily. So instead, you cut me off completely when I didn't comply." Margaret flinched slightly, but didn't deny it. "We thought you would come back, that you would realize we were right. And when you didn't," her voice softened. "Pride, perhaps, on both sides." We sat in silence, 10 years of absence stretching between us like a vast, uncharted territory. "Matthew tells me Dad is ill," I said finally. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, then resignation. "His heart," she said quietly. "He won't slow down or listen to doctors. Always been his own worst enemy." For the first time, I heard genuine fear in my mother's voice. Beneath her perfect exterior, she was terrified of losing him. "And the business troubles?" I asked. She straightened, the mask snapping back into place. "Matthew has always been overdramatic. Richard has everything under control." But she wouldn't meet my eyes, and I knew Matthew had told the truth. My parents, who had seemed invincible, were faltering. The empire they had built, the one they expected me to join, was crumbling. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt a complicated mix of emotions I couldn't untangle. Sympathy mingled with lingering hurt and a strange realization that these people who had loomed so large in my psyche were just humans, flawed, frightened, and facing their own reckonings. I didn't sleep that night. As dawn broke over the ocean, I wrapped myself in a blanket and sat on the private stretch of beach, watching the sky shift from gray to pink to gold. The confrontation I'd both dreaded and anticipated for a decade had finally happened, but nothing felt resolved. Instead, I felt hollowed out, as if the anger that had partly fueled my success had been spent, leaving uncertainty in its wake. Footsteps on sand made me turn. My father approached, looking older in the harsh morning light than he had in the filtered glow of the house. He wore casual clothes, khakis and a sweater, so unlike the sharp suits I remembered from childhood. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the sand beside me. I nodded. He lowered himself carefully, movements betraying a physical discomfort he tried to hide. For several minutes, we watched the waves in silence. "Your mother told me about your conversation," he finally said. "I assumed she would. She didn't tell me everything," he continued, "but enough." He dug his fingers into the sand beside him. "I've never been good at admitting mistakes, Emily." I remained silent, waiting. "When you left," he paused, seeming to gather himself. "When we drove you away, I was certain you'd fail, that you'd come back within months, humbled and ready to accept our guidance." "I nearly did fail," I admitted. "That first year was brutal, but you didn't." There was something in his voice I'd never heard before, a reluctant respect. "You built something impressive entirely on your own." "I had help," I said, thinking of Garrett, of Lisa. "Just not from my family." He absorbed this like a physical blow, shoulders hunching slightly. "I looked up your company," he said. "Coastal Vision Photography. Very impressive client list. Award-winning work." I glanced at him, surprised. "You researched me?" "Periodically. Over the years, he didn't meet my eyes. Never contacted you, just checked." The revelation stunned me, that he had silently tracked my career while pretending I didn't exist. "Why?" he shrugged, a gesture incongruously casual from such a formal man. "You're my daughter." The simple statement hung between us, containing both the connection he'd never fully severed and the support he'd completely withdrawn. "Your company seems quite successful," he continued. "The kind of success I would have bragged about if I'd achieved it in a field you approved of?" He nodded, acknowledging the truth. "I was wrong about many things, Emily. Photography was clearly the right path for you. He hesitated. "I wanted security for you. I never imagined you could find that through your passion." We watched a seagull dive into the surf and emerge clutching a small fish. "The irony is," he continued quietly, "you've achieved more stability following your own path than Claire has following ours." I absorbed his words. Perhaps the closest thing to an apology I would ever hear from Richard Carter. "I'm not coming back," I said finally. "Not to the family fold, not to the dynamics we had before." "I know," he nodded slowly. "But perhaps we could know each other again. on different terms. Before I could respond, a small figure appeared down the beach. Zoe, walking alone in the early morning light, camera in hand. She spotted us and waved, then continued her solitary exploration, pausing now and then to photograph something that caught her eye. "She reminds me of you," my father said, watching her, "always seeing things others miss." I followed his gaze, recognizing myself in her focused absorption, capturing the world through her lens. "She's talented," I said. "Shows real promise. Her parents want her to study business." "Pre-law," he said, glancing at me. "The Carter family tradition." "And what do you think she should do?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I think," he said slowly, "I've lived long enough to see what happens when you force someone to abandon their passion, and what happens when you don't." The conversation lingered with me throughout the day as I moved through my routine, answering emails, reviewing client photos, consulting with my team via video call. My family kept a respectful distance, using common areas but not intruding on my workspace. That evening, I called a family meeting in the living room. They gathered uncertainly, parents, siblings, extended family, eyeing me with a mix of weariness and curiosity. "I want to clarify a few things," I began. "This reunion has been unexpected for all of us. But now that we're here, I think we need to establish how we move forward." My mother straightened in her seat, preparing for negotiation as she would in a boardroom. "What did you have in mind?" "I'm not looking for full reconciliation," I said honestly. "Too much has happened. Too much time has passed for us to simply pick up where we left off. But I'm open to building something new, something healthier." "Define healthier," my father said, his lawyer's precision asserting itself. "Mutual respect," I replied. "Acknowledgement of our different paths. No more erasing or pretending. If we're going to have any relationship at all, it needs to be based on who we actually are, not who you wanted me to be." Claire shifted uncomfortably. "So, we just forget the past 10 years? Pretend everything's fine now?" "I should have told you that sooner." The extended family departed in waves, some with warm goodbyes, others with the polite distance of people who remained essentially strangers. Zoe was the last to leave, clutching a portfolio of photography basics I'd prepared for her and a business card with my private number. "Call me anytime," I told her, "about photography or anything else." She hugged me fiercely. "I will, and I'll send you my photos every week for feedback. I'm counting on it." As the last car pulled away, I returned to my empty house, my sanctuary that had been briefly invaded and was now mine again. I expected relief, but instead found a complex mix of emotions. Exhaustion from constant negotiation, lingering hurt from old wounds reopened, but also a strange sense of peace. The ghost family that had haunted the edges of my success had been replaced by real people, flawed, complicated, but no longer holding power over me. In the weeks that followed, I kept my promises. I answered Matthew's calls. I responded to my mother's tentative emails. I provided feedback on Zoe's increasingly impressive photographs. I maintained my boundaries when Claire made passive-aggressive comments about my unconventional lifestyle. 3 months after the reunion, I received an unexpected email from my father. His company was considering a complete rebranding to attract new investors. Would I be interested in handling the photography for their new marketing materials? The compensation was substantial, the professional respect even more so. I accepted the project, but insisted on my standard contract and creative control. He agreed without negotiation, a sign of how much had changed between us. 6 months later, I decided to host Thanksgiving at the beach house. Not from obligation, but by choice. I invited my family, but also my chosen family. Friends who had supported me when blood relations hadn't, colleagues who had become confidants, Lisa's son Michael, who had initially resented his mother's bequest, but eventually became a friend. Not everyone accepted. Claire begged off with excuses about prior commitments. Some relatives maintained their distance. But enough came to fill the house with a new kind of energy. Not the perfectly orchestrated performances of Carter family gatherings past, but something messier, more authentic, and ultimately more satisfying. As I looked around the table that evening, my father deep in conversation with my business partner, my mother helping Zoe adjust camera settings, Matthew playing board games with nieces, nephews, and friends' children, I realized I had created something I never expected. Not a replacement family, not a perfect reconciliation, but a new configuration of connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The beach house that had once symbolized my escape from family expectations had become the place where I could redefine family on my own terms. Later that night, after most guests had gone or retired to their rooms, I walked alone along the shore, watching the November moonlight shimmer on the water. 10 years ago, I left home with nothing but determination and a camera. The journey from then to now hadn't been easy, but it was mine. Every struggle, every triumph, every lesson learned. I realized true family isn't about unconditional acceptance, but mutual respect. It's not about erasing differences, but honoring them. Sometimes the hardest boundaries are the ones that allow real connection to grow. I hadn't forgiven everything. Some wounds would always leave scars. But I found something more valuable than perfect reconciliation: the knowledge I could build a meaningful, successful life on my own terms, and the confidence to welcome others into that life without sacrificing my hard-won independence. That, I realized, was the most precious inheritance of all. If you've ever felt overlooked or pushed aside by those who should have supported you, I want you to know you're not alone. This journey taught me the power of standing firm in your truth and carving your own path, no matter how daunting it seems. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you faced similar struggles or set tough boundaries to protect yourself? Share your story or advice in the comments below. Your experiences might inspire someone else. Remember, honoring yourself is the first step to building a life filled with respect, growth, and authentic connection. Let's support each other.